Today is the last presentation in this series, and we'll be sharing the broad strokes about HQ Shelter Activity Manager, also known as SAM, and in particular, the staffing and expectations of the role when in HQ. Presenters today, you have two, and we are jamming a lot of information into an hour here, so stay tuned. I'm Vesta Sung from the LA region, former regional shelter lead, and Julia Bishop, who is going to present the second half, the Cascade Region's feeding lead and Pacific Division Distribution of Emergency Supplies Manager. Okay, and some reminders here, more than a couple. This presentation is being recorded. As a reminder, AI meeting assistants and note takers are not allowed, so please turn those off. Cameras and microphones off to preserve bandwidth. And again, we will use the chat feature for questions and comments as we go along. We just ask that you keep the side chats to a minimum. And we're going to try and reserve some time at the end for question and answers. And as usual, the presentation will be posted on YouTube at the Red Cross Pacific Division Sheltering Series. So again, if folks would just leave their microphones off. Recorded. Okay. So as we get started here, we are talking about the Shelter Activity Manager, formerly known as the HQ Sheltering Manager. Broad stroke, as many of you know, but just in case we have some new people to the series, SAM oversees all Red Cross managed shelters across a DRO, which is a disaster response operation, provides direct supervision and support to each shelter site manager, and collaborates with partner managed shelters to meet Red Cross sheltering and mass care group standards. Now, we're not actually going into the details there, but if you go to OneSource, this was taken straight out of there, you can see that in OneSource, you're going to be able to find everything you need to do things from initiating sheltering, doing shelter counts, etc., and mass care group standards, which allows us to collaborate across the mass care activities. So what are we covering today? Well, how about where's my staff? And what's expected? Before we move forward, hot off the press, if you haven't seen it already, on OneSource, we have updated sheltering toolkit. It looks great, and we have Alex Rose to thank for that. It's organized a lot nicer now. It's very easy to navigate. So when you have a chance, go peruse that. And again, thank you, Alex Rose. So staffing up on a DRO and maintaining staff is potentially a massive orchestration, especially for national level disasters, right? They're huge, and we have a lot of responders. Beyond typical factors like shelter location and client numbers, the SAM must also look at extenuating considerations, especially if there are specific or unique needs for large numbers of clients, such as functional needs, right? Lots of pets, translation, communication services needed, unique demographics. We may have a young demographic, lots of babies, or the complete opposite. And also we may have a huge unhoused population. Transportation needs, maybe people are coming from a wider geographic area, and we may even need to have more people to help us because we need to augment deficiencies at a facility. Additionally, we got to look at limitations and exceptional circumstances, such as limited transition options for shelter residents. When there's not a lot of housing out there, it can be frustrating for our clients, and our shelter resident transition folks work tirelessly with them to try and find solutions, but it takes extra time. Sometimes the shelters have to remain open for extended periods, mass casualties, loss of homes. Perhaps it was previously managed from another service or agency. We have other partners and collaborators that may factor into what we are trying to staff. And of course, let's not forget media and political interests. So looking at the shelter staff itself, we want to consider the staff type and number of staff, right? So that's the type of shelters is critical that what kind of type of shelter that we're trying to staff and the activities within it. Minimum staff is based on the number of clients and the phase of the operation. So we're looking at shelter complexity as well. That could be additional shelter and client or clinical care staffing that we may need to bring in. Numbers and times of shifts each day. We may have atypical shifts or extra shifts. Types of shelter workers can be DRO responders that we're used to seeing people come onto the DRO, or local community volunteers and disaster event-based volunteers. There's a lot of logistics involved with that. And shelter facility layout. We may need more staff if the layout is strange and we don't have good line of sight to the activities in our shelter, and a variety of other reasons, of course. And of course, we have many operational complexity factors to think about. So if you don't know already, on OneSource, you can find these numbers that give us the worker to client ratios. And notice that they are based on the type of shelter: emergency shelters, evacuation shelters, and dormitory support only. So moving into the shelter staff itself and assigning the workers, right? Sam and the shelter site managers oversee the assignments of the workforce to each shelter. Assigned supervisor for each shelter worker is key, and making sure the team is experienced and that these gapped and experienced workers are paired with those with less experience. I'm sure several of you have been on DRs where you have people who hold a gap, but they had just gotten into it and really hadn't had a chance to exercise using that gap yet. So this is an ideal time to grow our workforce as well as meet the DRO needs. We need to assign total number of workers based on the complexity and services needed. We've talked about that. Those services could also include working with our counterparts in DHS for like nurses and things. We need to consider all these things, any activity in our shelters. Preparing standby teams, of course, that takes more people as well. And we need to ensure that our workers have scheduled days off. So all of this has to do with our staff and staffing numbers. As always, the SAM must prioritize shelters that have the greatest needs. Be sure to escalate when a shelter cannot meet Red Cross standards. The Mass Care Chief and the AD of Operations will determine if there will be staffing adjustments or if the shelter should be closed, consolidated, or transferred to a partner. When we're doing this kind of planning, we're also trying to look ahead, so 3 days ahead. If you see something coming up that may be an issue, a potential showstopper, this is a good time to escalate that if you cannot find a suitable solution. So shelter staff, right? You've ordered more staff and now they're arriving. So here's your number one tip, everyone. Get a headquarters SAM cell phone. If it is a large enough DR, you're going to want a separate cell phone for that, and put that number on the incident action plan. And if you're not holding it such that you can answer it, temporarily assign it to your assistant SAM if you have one, or to someone else so that it's constantly can be answered and such, because you will get bombarded. This is just a hot tip. All right. So as the arrivees come, they will have questions. And these are only the basic ones, right? Where am I staying? How do I get there? Who do I report to? Where do I report? And what will I be doing? As a matter of fact, feel free in the comments right now to add some of the common questions you may have fielded from arriving staff. I think it's a good opportunity for us to read what other people put in the chat and get an idea of what we might need to look out for and appreciate some of the other experiences. Oh yes, what shift am I working? That's a great one. Absolutely. Okay, so all right, we're going to back up 1 second here because these are great questions here. Do I have to do the night shift? There's a good one that comes up a lot. And obviously, you're going to be working with your shelter supervisors and your liaisons from different places within the activities to figure out what did they say they were coming to do first and all that. It gets fun. What supplies do I need? Anything special I should wear? Yeah, that's a great one, Daniel, because, sometimes there are requirements. To that end, shelter staff, the way we onboard them and out process is really important. In particular, the assessment that you give them as they come aboard gives you a fresh and the pertinent information at your fingertips. Things change. For example, if they did say they were going to do night shift and all of a sudden got to the site and decided they didn't want to do it anymore and put it in their assessment, that's pertinent information. So more questions for you. If you were to limit the assessment to about 12 questions in total, what information or questions would you want to know if you were rapidly staffing up at the SAM, for the DRO? And feel free to put those questions in chat. Again, we can all gain insights from each other's chat comments. Some of the things we're going to look at are the gap itself and the last experience in that assigned gap. Again, it could have been their first time, or it may have been 2 years ago, right? The shift they expect to be working in. Have they had experience in complex or large shelters? How about, do they have a car and how many people can that car sit? Are they an authorized driver, right? What activities do you enjoy? And so forth. Guys, they get a lot of this information from our workers beforehand, but again, sometimes it takes time to get that information. To have it right at your fingertips is critical. Um, that assessment really needs to be online. I know when these DRs spin up, a lot of times they're on paper, and we do the best we can. But get those online if you can. It's so much easier for you to have a team working with you then. Checking in and the mobilization center, right? Check in. You want that to be away from headquarters. Okay. Oh, good question, Laura. Absolutely. Do you know Skya? That should probably be like one of the top 3 questions in our assessments. And then checking in, we want to look at um, where we're going to put it logistically, right? We don't want it to be at headquarters because you'll get bombarded, but at the same time, we need them to have access to what they need to have access to: lodging, cars, the shelters, and things, and training. And if the DR is big enough, we may have mobilization centers. Just like with Hawaii, we had a mobilization in Oahu so that people could go to Maui or other places as needed. I believe in Guam, that eventually became more of a mobilization center because the hurricane went to a different path and they had to deal with that. The job induction. I saw someone mention something about culture. That's critical, right? We want to make sure people understand the culture they're working in, especially if, like, for example, they're in Guam or they're taking an assignment north with in Canada, right? We need to make sure people are well versed. And just-in-time training. What about those folks who haven't done sheltering in like a couple years and they may need a refresher? Or people who are brand new and haven't really worked in Skya, Laura's favorite. So again, we also want to test system access. Just ask them if they have that. You're going to want to be asking for Skya access and things like that in groups if possible. It's kind of inefficient to be asking one-offs. Okay. So, and again, back to the supervisor, more critical now than before, because the supervisor has to do the reviews, and the reviews are due before the staff leaves the DRO, technically. And as supervisors, they are being looked at. There's a metric, right? Are you getting these things done before you leave? If not, are you getting it done within a week after you leave? And if those aren't done, it comes up to the shelter site manager, or even more so, sometimes up to the SAM, right? So maybe it's a bit of self-preservation too. And we want to look at the fact that our job as SAM, as far as our staffing is concerned, is to be an advocate. The SAM must advocate for their staff and look at the high priority action items to do that. Importantly, we look at the support staff for that. If it's very complicated, you're going to be looking at the shelter support staff person, coordinator. I believe that is the title right now, is shelter support staff. If it's even bigger, like a level 7, they might even need an assistant. If you're working with mobilization centers, you're going to have a liaison there. And make sure you know who you're liaising with in staff housing. A lot of times they're going to be right next to you, shoulder to shoulder, especially in the big DRs. Transportation liaison and logistics. Again, have them on speed dial. Mass care activity leads. Designated phone for these people to call. All these folks will be able to reach you quickly and you can move quickly. It's great. Staff shelters. Whoopsies. What kind of staff shelters do we want, right? The congregate hotels, trailers, locations. These are all things to consider. Transportation, the type, quantity, location, assignees, the car keys. This is a big one. Don't chuckle. It's important. The car capacity and the drivers as well. And you might find some people are not comfortable driving, um, being the driver. They'd rather be the passenger, and that happens. The staffing tools that you'll be using, that's the spreadsheet based tool that you'll be using. If you don't have one, that's okay. There are a lot of people out there who have them. You're going to want to see what they want to use on that particular DR. And you're going to want a whiteboard wall. Okay, so let's have a look and see how this looks. Here's an example. And in this scenario, we have one shelter staffed, right? And you can see in the spreadsheet, it's the site manager, the supervisor, and all the SAs. It's kind of covered here, but travel home date, as they get close to the travel home date, it turns pink, right? And if they're over their time or it's the day they're leaving, it turns red there, right? Or the day they left. Um, shelter 2, you can see needs to be staffed. On the other sheets, on the spreadsheet, you often find information on the car and the lodging, things like that, so that we can find people and we can get people from A to B if we have to quickly staff up or move a standby team to a shelter. The whiteboard. Yes, it is temporary, and we know that. We know that a good gust of wind could bring it down, but it is temporary and we need it because it's where we can work out scenarios, right? It is where we can figure out what's the best way to do something, and we need to look at it as a team, a lot of people working together rather than staring at a little screen. It also gives quick access to people coming by who want to just find out exactly what was the name of that shelter, or um, is it fully staffed yet? Things like that. It allows for rapid decision making. But most important is that there has to be prompt online capture for this. So what you don't see is on the other side of that table is this young lady working with a computer with that spreadsheet and updating it. And of course, now let's look at the actual staff sheltering. We need to anticipate what's happening. Days off, illnesses, right? We need to schedule those days off for Sam, for us, and for all our staff, and cross-train in HQ. We also want to make sure we take into account early departures, extensions, and promotions, right? We have the job role transfer, gap assessment changes, and changing shifts. We have a new tranche coming. Is it going to be overlapping? How are we going to handle that? Is there enough housing while we overlap and for a few days ramp up extra responders? And standby teams, we talked about that, and strike teams. When are they going to be used? Where are they used? How will they be positioned? So a lot of this, as you know, is location, location, location. So make sure you have enough cars and beds that are in appropriate locations to accommodate and transport staff to and from the work sites. We have a question about tranches. That is the word they use for the different shifts, but shifts is like hours. So these would be like the 2-week shifts, the group of people coming in, rolling on for 2 to 3 weeks, and then the next group of responders coming in for 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. Does that keep a question? Does that answer the tranche question? Okay, yes. All right. So I think it's really important that everyone get a good sense of what we're doing here. This is not meant to tell you exactly how to do it, but to give you the broad strokes, to get the wheels turning. And if you find yourself having to do staff sheltering, then you can look this presentation up again on YouTube. All right, so I think we are now going to move on to Julia's presentation, and we can hold your questions for the end and we'll handle them all then. Thanks. Julia.
Okay, I took control, so I hope it'll work. So my section is about what does the AD of operations or your mass chief require you as a SAM, your shelter activity manager. And sometimes you don't always know what that is. So again, we're dumping a lot of information on you very fast and furiously, but it's stuff you can always go back and rewatch and look at our PowerPoints and even screenshot some of those pages if you need to. Vesta had some great things to share with that. So we're going to move on to there. The biggest thing as mass care chief that I would ask is know your job. Be honest with the leadership on your weaknesses so that they can better support you. Make sure you have a phone a friend. You know, we've got teams of people on this group that will say, hey, I'll be a phone a friend for you. Always be willing and open to learn. Somebody's got their mic on. Can you turn it off, please? Always be willing to mentor others. There a lot of people, especially during our new upcoming wildfire season again, we put a lot of people in stretch positions. Be willing to mentor them. And you need to be able to read situations and make decisions rather quickly. And sometimes that's not always easy to do, and you don't think you have the time to do it, but it's got to happen. So have the courage to admit you are wrong or you made a mistake, because everything is fixable. Know your reporting structure. This is huge. So WebEOC is where a lot of our information is going to. So the first thing you want to do once you get on the job is request permission at WebEOC at redcross.org. Say I'm the SAM on this DR, given the DR number. Within an hour, they'll give you access to WebEOC. Know SCIA and how to enter information, change shelters, add shelters, close shelters in SCIA. Frost is rolling into WebEOC, but you don't want those late night phone calls from Carolyn from Frost. Your shelter numbers are not turned in properly, so make sure that that is getting accomplished. The operational planning tool, your 215, so that's what you have, whether it's people or product. Make sure that that form is filled out on a regular basis and you have it ready for your mass care chief so that when they go to the tactics meeting, they can see we've got a couple of shelters that are overstaffed and a couple of shelters understaffed so they can shift people around, or they can see that we're in trouble, we need more people to come in. They've added a functional activity plan that every mass care group now has to come up with, and you will work with information and planning on doing that. So they have kind of a template that they'll walk you through to make sure you get that filled out so they know what you're going to do, what your plan is, how you're going to accomplish it. Know and understand that. Knowing the meeting schedule and which ones you are to attend. like I said, you won't attend the tactics meetings. I, a lot of times as mass care chief, will ask my team to come in, but sit like a quiet little mouse in the corner just so you can see why it's so important to make sure that you have all that information so you can learn and understand what that is. And be confident in writing effective evaluations. Be honest with them because nobody's perfect, and I hope nobody thinks they're going to get all excellence on their evals. Make good notes and know what the person has done and what they've accomplished. If you haven't worked closely with that person, like some of them, ask other people and get notes on that. Documentation and communication. It'll determine how successful you are or it'll make you struggle. Document everything and drop all your information into Teams. One of the things that I have learned, if you're using the DST laptops from Red Cross, once you created a document and you added information, you save it, you can no longer add or change anything to it, and you have to recreate that unless you dump it into Teams. Then you can continue to use it, and you want other people to be able to have access to what your spreadsheets and all your forms look like, because when you leave the job, they can see where you left off at. So the biggest thing Vesta talked about is the staffing spreadsheet. Somebody's going to want to know all this information. They want to know where they're lodged at, what the hotel, what their room number is at a staff shelter. Do they have a rental car? What's the key fob number? Have they had their days off? What's their last day? And then you can see as you look at that, oh my goodness, I need to put in a staff request because I've got a mass exodus happening here. Write a little daily report of your accomplishments and your concerns for leadership. I just asked you to create some type of a template and send that to your mass care chief and your AD of ops so they know what you've accomplished and what you're doing. So that just gives them information on what you're accomplishing and some of the concerns that may come up. Use the LCV or and the DEB SHULTIF shift tool whenever you can. So that's your local community volunteers and your disaster event-based volunteers. A lot of times the local volunteers feel like, oh, now this has turned into a big DR and we've got kicked to the curb. So if they can give you a couple days here and there, let them. They know the community, they know the people, and it's their area. They want to help and do the support they can. Disaster event-based volunteers, if you treat them well and mentor them, could possibly be another volunteer that joins the Red Cross at the end of the DR. And have daily shelter meetings with all your stakeholders. So you want to talk with external relations and logistics and all the other groups you're working with to see what the needs are and concerns are for your shelters and your shelter sites. Setting up your volunteers for success. This is really important. Do a good job induction for the incoming volunteers. What is happening specifically in this DR? And do an individual one-on-one interview with each volunteer. And I know people are going to say, I just don't have time for that. The mistake is if you don't, you're going to wish you did make time for that because you're going to know and understand more about who your volunteers are and what they've done work-wise in the past or other DRs that they've been on to know how to help place them in the different shelters and the different sites. Focus on the volunteers' strengths and not on their weaknesses. When you focus on their strengths, the weaknesses just fall along the wayside, and everybody is encouraging to each other that way. Hey, have daily shelter and staff meetings so you can share your victories and share the hurdles that you're struggling with. Sometimes it helps when you've got multiple shelters. Somebody said, oh, we had that problem, and you work together and work it out and said, this is how we made it, fixed it, and it worked really good for us. Encourage questions and input, and group sharing can help solve those problems. Make sure that supervisors know who they are writing their evals for, and the shelter service associates know who their supervisor is. That's highly important. It's surprising how many people don't know who their supervisor is. And you need to know who you're supervising to know how to write an eval for them. Encourage and verify. Check with your shelter managers to make sure all is running smoothly. So, what have they done? Have they made sure their trailer inventory has been happening so they know what they own and what they're lacking? Have they done their shift inspection? What does a daily logbook look like? I've gone into some shelters and I go to the logbook and it's like, have you guys been sitting here all day? Because there's nothing in here. No, we've been working. It's like, but it doesn't say that in the logbook. Or they'll put a note in there that's very important, but not their name or initials. So I know who to call and say, what happened here? I'm confused on this situation. So please, anybody and everybody working in the shelter can add information into the logbook. It's important to know, and it's too easy to get busy and forget that you told so and so that this happened and that happened if you don't put it in the logbook. Are the floors protected? We spend a lot of money trying to repair floors because we have not covered our floors. Has disability integration come in and checked on the facilities to make everything safe for our clients and for our staff? Have you created a needs list daily for the fulfillment team? Fulfillment normally doesn't respond until level 4 and above, but some um, job directors will prefer to do some type of fulfillment situation, whether it's a level 4 or not. What does a pet area look like? That's always important. Are you set up? What does it look like? What are your needs are? And encourage the shelter client meetings and an information room or board. I know a lot of people aren't comfortable with standing up and chatting with the clients, but it lowers their stress level and their expectations. And if you are starting to see some of those client presentations, they're talking about how they felt and how they were treated in a shelter. The biggest thing is they need information constantly to feel like they know what's happening, because we know we've been there, we've done it, but they're lost. And so make sure that you have client meetings with them and squash your rumors by putting information up on a dry erase board or something to let them know what is happening. Teaching and mentoring. Make sure you don't forget about your clients while keeping up with all the busy work. It's always about clients first. Does a shelter manager have an MCPC card? Do they know how to use it and how to reconcile it? Have they developed an emergency plan if you had to evacuate that building or something happened or a tornado was coming in actively while you were housing all these clients? Try to make time for site visits at the shelters. It's not always easy, and if you have multiple shelters, you may not be able to accomplish that. But when you are working in headquarters, your clients are your volunteers. You want to make sure they're safe, they're cared for, and they're supported. Collaborating. Have they worked with the feeding team to turn in the feeding needs? Any specialty needs or requests? Are they working with fulfillment or logistics if they have needs? That's what that 6409 for is for, and they keep telling us it's going to go away, which would be wonderful. But you still have to turn in a list of what your needs are. Are you working with DES on needs or UDM, unsolicited donations management? I've walked into shelters where they made room for the donations to where there were more donation area than there was client area. So if it looks like it's starting to get out of control, call DES and say, please come and get all this stuff. It's more than we can handle. It's always best if you're going to try and take in a lot of donations to have a separate room with shopping hours with volunteers manning those sites, or it's going to get out of control. Trust me. The pet coordinator. Are all the shelters supported properly by a pet coordinator? Work with that pet coordinator. If there isn't one that's itinerating to you, make sure you're working with the one at HQ to say, how are we doing in the shelters? And has disability integration visited all the shelter sites? Are you engaging with the alphabet team? I call them. It's your external relations, community engagement partners, government operations, and public affairs. They're out there in the know. Their object is to learn what the needs are and what the concerns are and share that information back and forth with us and with our emergency managers or the people out in the field. Uber is activated at a level 4 and above. When they do that, they will assign you a transportation logistics person to coordinate all the Uber rides for your clients if you have a Uber activity in your area. So they will be working underneath you, not under logistics. So it's kind of a crossover, but you will have to be mentoring them and managing with them as well. Some of the challenges you may have. trying to be perfect or trying to take it all on yourself. It's a team effort. Delegate. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. We're all volunteers. We're all out there to try to do the same job. Support each other in the best way you can and ask for help. Like I said, if you have a phone a friend, call your phone a friend. It's best not to if things get kind of ugly and you don't want to make a toxic situation on the DR. Call a friend and whine, scream, cry, whatever it needs to do to lower that stress level. When you don't confront problems or concerns quickly, they grow out of control rather quickly. So ask for help if you need it, but address the issue right up front, or it won't go away. It'll get worse. And if you're unwilling to admit lack of understanding or training, it's going to hurt you. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know everything, or I don't know this part of it. How can you help me? Is there someone that can explain this part to me? We're all learning, and we all plan on learning. Every DR you're going to go on, you're going to learn something new every time. I've learned something new on every DR, and I've been on a lot of them. And what's not wanted from an AD of operations or mass care chief from a SAM is big egos. Just be yourself and share what you know. Don't micromanage, delegate, and trust your team. Sometimes you have to put jobs in writing with deadlines so there's no confusion or question on who's supposed to be doing what and when that needs to be accomplished. And don't be afraid to share the information. A lot of people don't want to put stuff in teams. They're afraid if they teach everything that they know that that person will get deployed next time, and they won't. This is, we have way too many disasters in this country to keep that kind of attitude going on. All of us are going to be successful if we support each other. And the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And that's what we do as Red Crossers. So now we'll take any questions you may have. I know we went through this rather fast and furiously, but we were hoping to leave more time for questions at the end for you guys.
Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Where can we find these PowerPoints? Or can you give us the link?
So this will
You're
be
gonna go-
posted on YouTube within about a week, if less. There is, if you go YouTube and Google and search for Red Cross PAC Division Sheltering or Shelter Series, you'll get everything that we've done for the past 3 years. As a matter of fact, all the slides.
Yeah.
But is there a deck that you could send us so that we can have quick references?
I don't see why we can't do that. All right, let me try and
Yeah, Kim, I'll forward it on to you.
yeah.
Thanks so much.
The staffing we went through really quick. Anyone have questions or comments, or anyone who's been
Mike
thrown
Best
into
has his
that?
hand up. Vesta, Mike?
Yes, Mike, please.
Yeah, I put my question in the chat, but basically what it is in terms of the metrics of shelter site capacity and population of clients, especially during a rapid evacuation event, it seems the 9 a.m. shelter report and midnight counts are inadequate. You almost need a turnstile count of ins and outs to evaluate the approach to capacity, so new shelters can be stood up. And helping clients is our main goal, but we serve no one when clients are sitting outside a full capacity shelter with a long drive and another wait facing them before they receive aid. Perhaps a dedicated person should stay on top of the counts and relate those to the operations, sheltering people so that they can make those kind of decisions, and the DR director.
And that's certainly someone you could designate for that as a SAM if you need assistance for that. The one thing I think about though is the type of shelter makes a difference. If it's an evacuation shelter, especially like in a hurricane, it's an evacuation shelter, and at those times we are not using SCIA to collect information yet until the danger has passed and we have converted to an emergency shelter, at which point then we can start using Skya and capturing those head counts and things.
How quick is, how quick is, excuse me. How quick is Skya about responding to the numbers that you put in? Is it instant?
It's instant.
I see. And other than, the midnight count, does Skya talk to, WebEOC at all?
There are port overs of data now.
Is there anywhere where there's a metric like at the national headquarter summary that evaluates in a progressive manner how fast a shelter is approaching capacity?
Well, they have all of those metrics for national headquarters and
Is that
leadership.
one of the metrics? Is that one of the metrics that they're?
Well, I don't know that it's exactly that metric, but they can see it and they have all the infographics and informatics they need up there. A lot of the information also for those of us who are not seated at that table. If you have access to NSS, you'll be able to see those reports.
And I think the other part of the answer to that question, Vesta, is I don't think it's not national headquarters responsibility to monitor that. That's the shelter activity manager. Should be monitoring that, or somebody on their staff to see, you know, how close we are to capacity. And that's one of the big challenges of this job, especially in the very beginning when things are growing and getting staff in there. The national headquarters will look at it as it's growing in the very beginning to see whether they need to send. A lot of times, if a disaster is growing really fast, they'll just send people. They won't wait for a staff request, but they're expecting the shelter activity manager to be watching that.
And so to
And
your
then
point,
what-
to your
what-
point, it's good to have, you know, if you are juggling too many things and it's big, then get a SAM assistant and they can help you check those numbers, because that is what the mass care chief and AD ops and all those folks are looking at, those numbers.
Was there a
So
SAM
that
assistant?
new, the
Go
new
ahead.
form they've got coming out, the functional planning tool, that is what National looks at and said, we're looking at this operation and we feel that you're gonna have to open 8 shelters and need, you know, XYZ volunteers and all that. So they put that out ahead of time for you. And then when you write your functional plan and going, oh, this is growing faster than we planned, you send that back to them and then they know, okay, this is moving a lot faster than we thought, but it is your responsibility and your ability. That's why when I made that comment earlier, you got to learn to read the situations fast and furiously and make decisions on the spot. You know, everything's fixable. And so just do what you can to make sure you accomplish what you need to accomplish.
And to
Very-
escalate your concerns.
Very good, thank you.
We have a great question in the chat here from Daniel. We do a lot of shelters in our region. Can you talk more about how to manage those? Transition from DAT to little evac DR is also happening a lot more than in the past. So there's two things there, as you mentioned, you know, the DAT response turns out to be bigger and we need to open a shelter. So I think that's why we get to practice that with Thunderbolt. But let's talk a little bit more about going from an evac center to an emergency shelter. Because the
can I first address the evac center? So when you're doing an evac center, you're usually in a parking lot somewhere and you put up a canopy and you've got snacks and the water and you just get them in the area, in the building. Sometimes you're in a building, sometimes you're in a parking lot, in a car waiting to see what's going to happen. Then if it looks like you're going to have to open that site as an actual shelter, that's when you do that. But it's just to get them to a safe place to where you know what you're looking at. So you could have, you know, 5 cars in that parking lot, or you could have 40. So that's when you kind of look at the situation and determine what the needs are going to be and how that's going to happen. Okay, Vesta, take it from there.
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, because you won't know if you can convert that particular site into a shelter or not, right? That's what SAM is doing with their team and looking at the EOC and all the things like WebEOC. If you are converting it, right, then you have to staff appropriately and move quickly to get enough staff there. Evacuation staffing numbers are less than the numbers required for emergency shelters. And as we progress and there are more needs coming up, you're gonna need more. So remember I told you about that 3-day foresight? You need to be looking at things and planning out at least 3 days in advance. That conversion over means getting those laptops over. If you can't get laptops, you're going to be looking at what the connectivity situation is and what can be happening. What is plan B? Working with your AD of operations and mass care chief, because, you know, in perfect world, we are doing everything online, but we can't always do that. We know that Skya even has servers that if systems are down, we can get servers out there that you can collect everything on the server and it will try and ping the mothership, if you will, every 2 minutes until it can get through. But at least we're collecting it. You may need to be doing on just-in-time training at the site as well. When you're doing evac centers, you may have larger numbers of LCVs and disaster event-based volunteers. CERT may be there or something like that. And so you're going to be working with your shelter site managers to make sure they are getting what they need at that moment. It may not be easy to get it there, but that conversion can be a little tricky. Was there another hand up? Laura, did you want to add anything?
No,
Yes, I had a hand up. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Any talks of like using Starlink?
That's not my swim lane, unfortunately. It sounds cool. I'm not sure.
Red Cross is Starlinks. We have Starlinks. It depends on the disaster on whether we're going to use them or not.
Yeah, we've used them, but I don't know if it's going to be standard for anything at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Lots of friends here. One thing that I was going to say is they will make sure that you always have connectivity one way or another. So very seldom you're going to go more than a few hours without connectivity in the shelter. And what you need to do is if you do have problems, escalate, send it to the headquarters and ask them for help. And they'll find a way to get you online.
And that is nice when that can happen. Personally, I know I've been in a situation where connectivity took 3 or 4 days to get.
I think one
Alright.
other thing worth mentioning too, Vesta, is we're doing this session specifically for people who want to work in headquarters. When you're doing your job induction or when you're checking in for your on the DR, if you have interest in working in headquarters, make sure to let them know at that time. Because one of the best ways to get experience doing this position is to start off as an assistant in headquarters and learn the job when you're not totally responsible for all of it, but you can start learning it a little bit at a time. And they'll only know that you're interested if you tell them.
That's why it's important to do that one-on-one job induction.
Yeah.
'Cause you
breaking up there.
somebody
So
that their work world, they were in HR. Oh, please. Yes, I would love to have you working here. Listen and learn. Go.
great advice, both of you. I'm not sure if it was just on my end. You were a little garbled there, Julia. But one thing I want to add to that is, go for the smaller ones first anyway. And with tiering, a T1, T2 level, that's actually going to make it a little bit easier for us to find appropriate staff. best fit staff. And as a SAM, you don't need to add the complexities of a complex or large shelter. So maybe practice working with, um, smaller shelters first. So that would be your chapter or regional responses. And then you start juggling a few shelters, right? So now it's not quite as easy. And then you start understanding that your span of control is getting bigger. And now that you're at 5 shelters, maybe and depending on where they're located, you're having 2 shelter site managers that have to be responsible for a couple of them, itinerating. These are things you're figuring out as you grow with the size of your DRs. There's a lot of experience in this room. Laurie, anything you want to add? I think I saw you in here.
Yeah, I'm here. I was just actually typing something, but the question came up earlier about shelters. So in our region, we have maybe 3 different areas. Assembly area where you meet in the parking lot. Our evac shelters are overnight shelters with no feeding and no cots. And then emergency shelters are proper shelters where we provide full services to the clients. And according to Red Cross standards, if you keep your evac center open for more than 48 hours, it converts over into an emergency shelter.
And
So
that's in Hawaii. Right?
that's everywhere. That's Red Cross standard that converts over.
It does convert. That's what I've not done the 48-hour conversion, but I have done the purposeful after 24 hours convert to an emergency shelter. Yeah, Hawaii does things differently.
We do, but the 48-hour rule, that's a Red Cross thing.
Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. Other questions? Anyone else?
Yes. Hello, everybody. I have a question. Um, well, I am a caseworker and also other gap, and I've been in different. I've been deployed a few times, and also I let them know my supervisor and everybody that sent me to to help. I'm not a driver. I not drive. So a few times I've been deployed, and people ask me, "How can you accept to deploy when you're not driving?" So I just wanna um, any of your expertise tell me a little bit more about from that time this person told me that I no feel deploy going to deploy.
I think our DRs are so different. No two are alike. And depending on what you're deploying to, there may be a need. It really depends on, for example, maybe when we answered not first one, the Guam hurricane from like 2 or 3 years ago, we had a staging area here at LAX. And local folks who didn't like to drive it was very systematic for them to just take a bus and come over if they want to work there. Um, that might be one of the situations. But you'll notice that sometimes when we first stand up a DR, the call goes out in text or email or whatnot. And in that email, it will say we are not taking any accommodations at this time. So a lot of it has to do with the phase and the type of DR we're looking at.
Yes, because when I'm deployed, my supervisor's here, and everybody knows that I no drive. So, but anyway, I always find my way. I pay Uber or try to be efficient, and but that was the only thing. And then from that time, I say, oh, I don't want to deploy anymore because I feel embarrassed that I'm not driving. So I've been very useful because I've been supervisor, and I've been case working, and I've been translator and a Spanish speaker. So I've been helping a lot. So um, but with your answer, give me strength. So when they happen again and they send me the information, I will be deployed. So they give me hopes. So I would like to deploy again. So because they're sending
keep
me a lot
asking.
and I stop it.
Keep asking because when the right opportunity comes, we will need you. Just look at what happened at LA fires or in Hawaii when it's right in your backyard. It's all hands on deck.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. So since the helper or SAM assistant is not put on the door, what is the pathway from going from tier 3 to tier 2 to tier 1 and getting the experience? And I think the best way would be to become the helper. Is there a pathway? Are you aware of any way for that?
There is, but I'm going to throw this at Laura.
I think the best way to find out about these positions is to let the person in headquarters when you check in know that you're interested in it.
Yeah, I understand
You're,
that.
you're
Yeah.
right. They don't put these positions on the door. They usually, if they request somebody, they'll ask for a shelter supervisor. One of the things that I learned working in headquarters right away is the first thing you do when you get in headquarters is find your most experienced person and grab them for yourself or to help you until you can get somebody else out there.
Great.
I
I
wish there
appreciate
was
that.
I wish there was a better way, but there really hasn't. There's no formal way of unless if somebody was really really wanted to do it, they could put a note in there that it's a headquarters position. A lot of times, unfortunately, the workforce person deploying them might not read the note, and the person has no intention of working in headquarters. They'll just assign them to get them out there.
Thank you.
Now, Vesta has an answer too. I know she does.
Yeah. Okay.
Me?
Now,
No,
Yeah.
I just know that your workforce in your region, you need to talk to them because they have their process. Okay. National headquarters knows what they want when they want to bring people up to from 3 to 2, right? Or from 2 to 1. I was just talking to someone else about it. They were telling me what I needed to do because I was missing on my thing for a OM manager type thing. But so work with them. They'll tell you what you need. They're going to be the closest to your portfolio, if you
yeah,
will.
I understand all of that. Yeah. Thank you.
He is that guy for our region.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. No. Yeah. Okay. So my question actually is, when you have all of the qualifications, there is no way to get to a DR for that specific job. And I was wondering, and I know there is no path at this point, I was wondering if the cadre management are going to be thinking about that and is going to open up different paths for people to go forward once they're qualified and they are designated as a headquarters, SAM. Is there, what's the pathway to get those helper jobs to be able to move and get full qualifications?
We're
So
really
I'm not a cadre
advocating.
manager.
It's the direction that the cadre is going towards. But now we have to realize as of June 1st now, any deployments past this, if you aren't at that level, you have to have one of the task books filled out. And if you're going to do that and work in headquarters, then you will be observed at that role. And after you've done that enough times, 2 or 3 times in that role, then they can recommend that you move up to that next level. The situation as an assistant or a deputy or whatever is you're learning that role. That's why there's really no path to go that direction. You're learning that role to become that person on going forward. But now everybody's going to have task books and have somebody observe and sign you off that you are competent to do what you need to do. And it may take a couple of deployments to make that happen.
Yeah, and that's where comes the problem, as in, unless you're there somehow in that job, but if you have not had any deployments and you're just trying to get into it, I see that as the only reason I brought it up is I know there's a lot of people here who are going to be part of the cadres and they're going to be cadre managers. I just wanted to put it out there that it would be a nice thing to think about and find a direction for people who want to get there. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you,
perfect.
Jamshid. I think one of the other things that we've noticed is there's not much training for this position either, which is why we put this section of the sheltering series together. There's not really a whole lot of training for headquarters positions. So thank you to all the presenters for bringing that information forward and sharing their